This is how to do the pile weave. The pile weave can use a lot of material, so I like to use the width of my loom to measure out about 6 or 7 lengths of yarn. I'm going to position my heddle bar so that all of my warp threads are parallel with my working space, and I'm going to push my heddle bar out of the way so I have more room to work. Then, taking one end of my yarn, I'm simply going to weave it through 3 or 4 of my warp threads. For the pile weave, you want to stay pretty close to your loom, so I'm going to take my excess yarn and place it to the side and position my hands closely to my warp threads. So staying close to my warp threads, I'm going to cross over the one that the yarn is coming out from underneath, and I'm going to pick up the second piece of warp thread to my left. Here I'm going to create a 4 with the yarn underneath the warp thread, and I'm going to keep the tension tight. If you have too much slack, it is hard to control, so you want to keep a close grip on your yarn. So again, picking up the warp thread to my left, placing the yarn underneath, and making a 4 with that yarn. Keeping tension tightly with my right hand, I'm going to push the yarn through that 4 and grab it with my left hand. At this point, I'm placing my ring finger and my middle finger through the loop on the left, and at the same time that I pull up with my right strand, I'm pulling down with my ring finger and creating tension in that loop, and pulling until I have a knot wrapped around my warp thread. At this point, the top of that yarn can slide through your left and right hand, and you could even pull it completely and it would undo the knot itself. So again, lifting up that warp thread, creating the 4, putting your right yarn through your left loop, and simultaneously pulling down with your left ring finger and pulling up with your right hand, and you should create the loop. Keeping that tension tight should create a loop. You can have your loop be any size, but in order to make it smaller, simply place your finger on the knot to hold it in place and gently pull up with your right hand. So to continue the pile weave, I'm simply going to pick up the next warp thread to my left and repeat the process. Make the 4, take my right yarn and slip it through the loop, pull down on the back yarn with my ring finger while pulling up with my right hand and creating that knot, sliding my loop to its desired size, and repeating with the next warp thread. To reverse your pile weave in the opposite direction, you're simply going to flip everything that you do, including putting your excess yarn to the other side and just doing the opposite. So now you're creating your backwards 4 underneath your warp thread, taking your left hand and pushing that yarn through the loop, creating the loop and pushing down that back piece of the yarn with your ring finger while simultaneously pulling up with your left hand, holding it in place and creating your loop. as you're going, you can create your pile weave until you have about an inch or two left of your yarn. And then you simply want to weave that tail back through your warp threads and push it to the back of your weave.